once a rule is set, how do you break the rules? Okay, and that's where designers play a big role. He was looking at my design. He said, either you are a scientist who is masquerading as an artist, or you are an artist who is masquerading as a scientist.
How do you feel creative people will be able to stay relevant and also leverage AI?
Put a lot of hard work. To be frank, sitting here today, I don't know how 5 years down the line design industry is going to look like.
The critique of design ops often is there is too much process and it stifles creativity.
Studios give you breath and it helps you polish up your holistic view of design.
Hey there. Welcome to Design Oops with Indiefolio. Today we have Shayak Sen with us, who's the head of design at Myntra. We unpack Shayak's entire journey from doing architecture to doing design and then having his own startup, working in consulting and then leading some of the top startups in India. A lot of advice for design managers and young designers is in this podcast. Thanks a lot for your time and welcome to the podcast, Shayak.
Hey Kamal, good to meet you and super excited to be here on the podcast.
I'm glad I got a Sunday morning slot. So, Shayak, the first question I always ask is about understanding how design leaders pick that design is their calling. I've gone through your LinkedIn, and when you were in, I think, your school, I saw a lot of mentions of science, right? You won something at a science exhibition. You also, I think, took part in a lot of activities, quizzes, and science was a core focus. But then you ended up studying architecture and then did a master's in user experience. So, how did that entire journey happen and what was going in your mind when you had to take a call, okay, where do I build my career?
Like you mentioned that, while I was very much into designing and making, architectural plans, not purely in terms of design, but then designing, making architectural graphics and a little bit of artwork in my college. But I never thought that I will take this up as my, core profession. In the middle of my school, I got really, really interested in physics, particularly. And I did want to pursue physics, but then as it happens around you, everybody's preparing for IIT, and then you also go to that entire, loop of preparing for IIT. So I prepared for IIT, and luckily I got the stream of architecture, and because of my rank. And while nobody else was sure, I think me and my parents were very sure that because I used to also indulge in a lot of creative activity, it seemed like a perfect blend of science and art at the same time. So I think that's how I ended up being in architecture. It was quite life-changing for me because, of course, it allowed you to explore the depths of aesthetics and how space and how, experiences are built, and how great architects like, Frank Lloyd Wright or Mies van der Rohe or Norman Fosters of the world are actually shaping the design and crafting the spaces around you. I remember one of my professors once when I was presenting to a jury, and he mentioned when he was looking at my design, he said, either you are a scientist who is masquerading as an artist, or you are an artist who is masquerading as a scientist. In short, basically it meant was that I was kind of trying to always bring both of those together. And some of those early works in architecture actually still form the basis of what I do in my UX design. When I was doing this from a point of view of architecture, see, the reason why some architecture looks good, if you look at temples or, mosques or, churches, you see there is a sense of scale. So you have, the arches, which has the bigger arches and the smaller arches and the, so scale is fundamental sense of aesthetic. And this comes from the Mandelbrot's or the fractals, yeah. So, the fractals and how, the Fibonacci series, operates. So these are some ratios which actually your mind really reads through and responds to. Now, so there are more things. For example, the texture. Now, texture at what scale? So why does the bark or the wood feels good and warm to human perception than something which is, let's say, very metallic? Okay, and it has to do with the texture, and the texture at a certain scale. So everything that you see, and even like, for example, staircases, right? When you have, because there's a sense of pattern scaling down, which is something that you respond to. And that is particularly because in nature, you see patterns scaling down. So you see a tree, you have the larger branches, then you have the thinner branches. So these are semi connected, right? So I think that mathematics comes from nature and that mathematics is very ingrained. The whole point is that can you do it generatively? Okay. And a lot of people, even 15 years, 20 years back when I was studying, people were trying to generate those patterns organically. There's another field from where I took a lot of inspiration, which was cellular automata. Okay. Which is fundamentally like, I don't know if you've heard about this Conway's game of life. Okay. Which is basically a matrix of grids, and the grid square is basically a living cell, and the rest are basically, and if it's not filled, then it's a dead cell. Then you put some basic rules and let that matrix kind of, go through generations. And you see very interesting patterns emerge out of that. And sometimes these patterns are, almost like living cells. They are moving around and doing something. So I applied the same principles to design the plans of my buildings. And I was trying to figure out that if it is possible to use the same logic. For example, you take one room, and you basically then put a grid, and in that grid every segment is basically a room, and then you put some rules around that every room should be connected to the other room by so much of wall space, and then you need so much of area around it to be open so that there's light and air that comes in, and then you allow that to self-generate itself. So some of these exercises is what kind of I carried forward to my work later on in design systems and in an algorithmic way of looking at your storefront weaves. So yeah, I think that was somehow the foundational for me to kind of look at design mathematics like that.
Now, you said you're either a scientist or an engineer masquerading as an artist or vice versa, right? And that confuses a lot of people, right? If I'm young and I'm looking to understand is design for me or not, what's happened is pehle design was like, hey, I can draw. I should probably, learn Illustrator and, create visuals and graphics. And there are so many people today who really feel towards that. They have a great aesthetic sense. But then increasingly, we're all talking about data, research, analytics, marrying that with business of design. Really confuses some artists that is design still really for me or it's become something else? So who is design for? Is it for somebody who's analytical or more creative?
And there are two parts to it. One is that the creative part of it and then the execution part of it. The execution part will always take an analytical course of a way, and they're all, like optimization can come into picture because to be frank, really, I think the challenge is because we always look at it from the point of view of a job or, profession. And then it becomes a little bit of a challenge because then you try to figure out that, okay, if I am a designer, I do this, okay, I make screens or I do this. But see, I mean, when we went for, design education, that is not how we used to look at design. Design was obviously, you had an objective, a goal in mind, and how the tooling operates or how the execution, works is something that you figure out along the way and you try to master that also at the same time. But the core was, and like you said, the creative part is basically about few very fundamental things. Is about that what are you trying to communicate or trying to tell, okay, and with your art, and the specifics of that art, how that invokes those emotions in somebody. So in terms of architecture, it was about space. You could be communicating something very interesting or very astounding by just having an open space. Nothing, there's no building on it, but you are making a commit, And then the point is that, okay, if there's no building, there's no nothing, then why do you need construction design and all of that? But if you're an artist and then you decide that, okay, I now need to have some pieces here and there, okay, so to get that, the communication or the experience of that space come out, then I also need to figure out that how it's going to work out. And then you get into the science of it. Then you try to figure out that how it works. Eventually, we'll also try to figure out that, how can I optimize it and not spend my time doing that more and more. So I think most creative people are also, in some way, they have a little bit of science going in. For example, you look at musicians, like, and Indian classical music. It's all maths, right, at the background. I was really very amazed and pleasantly, surprised when in the new Bandish Bandit, you had a character who is like data analyst who is trying to figure out new beats and and how it kind of works along with the Indian classical music. And that's actually how it works, because some of the innovations in an art and creative work comes from a lot of science also coming into the picture, right? So I think good artists are also looking at the science part of it, and they try to break down their own thought process into pieces. So they go hand in hand. So as long as you are true to the core objective of what you're trying to do, which is trying to communicate something very, very meaningful. And then secondly is that you are using some level of art and craft to kind of, invoke that experience. The rest, I think, should flow.
Another thing is, you were very young when you started your own, design studio, and it's increasingly something many people want to do. Being at Indiefolio, I constantly hear people wanting to start freelancing full time, open their own, boutique studio. So what was going in your mind then? Why is it that you chose to have your own setup versus, I think, continuing to work in another corporate for 2-3 more years?
Back then, I was definitely somebody who loved to challenge myself a lot. Okay. And after my, architecture, and I got into traffic and communications while I was in IIT Roorkee. And then I got a job in TCS as a software developer. And I was very clear that I don't want to join TCS as a software developer. And I got clear at some point of time that I don't want to pursue this job. I came down to Bangalore and joined a design agency, an advertising agency. I did graphic, logos, communication design at that point of time, and got exposed to the entire startup world. And I'm talking about 2006. And then the startup world was not that glamorous. But there was really interesting work happening. So while this was happening, I think somewhere I got a point of view that a lot of design advertising is basically you're trying to persuade the user to do something. Sales or marketing, basically. You're pursuing the desire to buy something of it. That communication was always on those lines, that you're trying to excite him to, do something and buy something. And somewhere I felt that design has to play a bigger role than that. Just not do this. There could be something else which makes their lives better. In the search of that, I ended up, joining IDC, Bombay, where I pursued my master's in visual communication. When I was joining IDC, I had two things in my mind. One was that design has to play a bigger role. The second was that I wanted to make movies because, like I said, I wanted to communicate and talk to the world through my movies. And I wanted to make movies. That was my inspiration, motivation to kind of at least go and join IDC. Two things very interesting happened in IDC. One was that when I joined IDC and you have those projects, you have to kind of do like 6 months projects. So I picked up a topic around film that I want to make a film. And my professor, he told me something very, something very significant, which kind of changed the way I look at design after that, was that, no, you don't start with the medium. You start with the problem, you find the right solution to the problem, and then you pick the medium which suits the solution the best. So if you are doing something for the rural areas and you need to design pamphlets, then you have to make pamphlets. Okay. If your solution requires a film or a documentary film, then make a documentary film. If it requires a website, then build a website. So it was like that, right? And it kind of opened up my eyes. Obviously, I realized that that's how you approach design. What I did, of course, was that I found a problem, reverse engineered the whole thing, and I found a problem which required me to make a film so that I could make a film. And I did that to experience the entire process of filmmaking. That was quite revealing. But the other thing very interesting that happened was, before that, for me, everything, and even today I hold this true, is that communication design is a foundational design. Communication design is age-old. Okay, it starts from the time when humans probably started doing cave paintings. Even language is a communication design. Designing the letter fonts is a communication design. So it has come over ages, right? And communication design is a core fundamental. So if we today about interface design, or we talk about advertising, all of just communication. At some point of somewhere you are trying to communicate to the user. The mediums might change, the age might change, and everything might change. But at the end of the day, it's about communication. So I wanted to join visual communication as a stream. And that year, interaction design was starting as the first year for IDC to have interaction design as a course. And my professors in my interview told me that, why don't you join interaction design. And I said, I don't have any idea about interaction. I didn't know about interaction design, UX at that point of time. I had no idea about that. For us, UX was about making websites, and it was not exciting because website capabilities were very limited at that point of time. I joined visual communication, but in 2007, iPhone launched, and it showed the world that what is possible now in digital experiences. The limitations that you used to think about, how will you manage all of that? You cannot make too much of. You're still making gradient by cutting slices and all of that. And then suddenly realize, oh my God, the possibilities are endless. Okay, now with this. And so when I was graduating in 2008, I met a couple of my friends. Okay, the world is not going to be the same after this. Okay, and the era of apps have started, and this medium is going to take over the world. So we had to do something about it, and we decided to start this company as a UX design boutique design and user experience design agency. It's called Cheese, and we were one of the very early design agencies which was talking about UX and UI at that point of time. I was 27, 26, 27.
Got it. And what was like when you started that, right? It's pretty. Today, a lot of people think of that as an option, right? So I'm trying to understand when is a good time to start your own studio, right? Versus maybe doing a full-time gig.
To be frank, there is no a blueprint for this, but I can tell you that what I learned. One is obviously I wanted to do something which was bigger than me, and like something grand. I remember I was talking to my founders that we have to run fast, break things, either win or pack up and go back home. Things like those, right? You were like totally in a very different mind space. I think, but couple of things. One is that UX in India was not very popular, and everybody was learning the craft of it because the craft was getting built around that time. So it allowed you a lot of liberty to experiment and fail and come back. Your clients were also happy to explore and fail and, do a lot of things. If you come into a field which is already very well established, then it's very important that you start by knowing the fundamentals of that. So you would be learning by making the mistakes which somebody else has already made, and, you will be repeating that, reinventing the wheel somewhere. And for us also, it happened a lot of times. But at least the impact was not that high because the whole, the world was kind of, building around this, and they were trying to figure out what works, doesn't work. For example, coming from design school, for me, documentation was very important. So I was trying to set up a practice within my startup that we will document things, and this is how we will document. But we were not able to figure out the value of that documentation because we were fast, agile. This project is done, so it is kind of, put it the shelf and then you forget about it. So how does it, so we are documenting, we are trying to use the documentation for some impact, but we didn't know. And some of my partners who were into the sales are money, why are we wasting time in this? Let's just focus on the projects that we're doing. But when I joined Frog, I realized that the documentation is a long-term impact, right? You don't see the impact tomorrow or day after. And some of the best practices that we're doing, which was coming intuitively to me because I have done my, design education, is a good practice to have in a larger organization and how it helps. But I couldn't defend that when I was starting up my own, right? Okay, So I think those are few things which you learn. So like I said, there's no blueprint or no right time. Right. Though for services, I think one is very critical is that there are few things that I can talk about is that if you want to do a business, one thing is that as early you can try is good because last time I was visiting my alma mater IIT Roorkee, and there were a lot of young and kids who were like, if we want to explore setting up this product company or you're building products and all, I think do it because that's the best time you'll get, de-risk yourself to a large extent and do something.
Right.
And I do see that many good colleges, they are actually scratching the surface of business right in the college. And that's the right place to keep at as you start very early. Few things for agency, if you're running a design service, always the biggest challenge to always to get the right client. And see, it's not about the volume of client that we get. You get 3 good clients, and that can set you at a very different level altogether in your entire journey, right? And you can have hundreds of small, clients coming to you and getting stuff done, but none of that, set you in a mix orbit. But how we get those clients? So I think what you need to kind of figure out is that do you have those channels ready where you can, if you have them ready, you can start as early as possible. Doesn't matter. But if you don't, like working in the industry for some time and getting those channels for getting those connections, that helps.
Fantastic. The other thing is, you also worked in consulting and, as they say, on the agency side, right? And you obviously been on the brand side, as they say. So this is another thing people are confused about, Shayak, right? They're like, should I go to a studio or should I go to a product company, right? Especially in user experience. So what are the pros and cons of both, since you've experienced too?
First of all, let me give you a short answer. Studios give you breadth, okay, and it helps you polish up your holistic view of design because see, every industry, every medium, everywhere you go, you have to work with a different scale. For example, if I'm making a website, my base font size is going to be 14 or 16. Okay. If I'm working on mobile, I will, crank it down to, let's say, 12. Okay. Now, it's like the padding, the line heights, everything changes with the medium, the scale. If I am working for a luxury brand, my scale is going to be very different. I'm working with a platform, and my scale of line heights and everything is going to be very different. So these basic fundamentals across industry, across this thing, yet those muscles are built very well when you work in a studio because you're working on multiple projects, you are working, and some of the discipline and cadence get built. I think that's very, very good to have. When I ran my own agency and then I went and joined Frog, I had the same question to my, VP of design there. Okay. So I met him and I said that we do great work for our clients. But the problem is that after we have delivered this, we don't get to go deeper into this by looking at how it performed based on data and everything. And don't you think that is important that, we go deeper and try to iteratively solve it and make it better? So he said, of course, like that's an ideal setting, and we do the best we can do within our project contract. And he said that many of the folks who have worked at Frog, they love working on different kind of problems. But at some point, this point comes up, and then they go and join a product companies. And there are many people who have come back after coming, because after they have gone deeper and solved those problems, they have a newer understanding and they come back to consulting because now they can use that knowledge of data and everything, how to kind of process it, to again work on varied projects and everything. A good way of learning is going breadth first, then going deeper first, and again coming back to breadth, and probably you repeat this cycle in some way. Where do you want to start from? It's up to you. One challenge with starting right from the product company would be that you start believing that this is the way of the world and that is how it should operate. But everything that happens in a product company is a means to an end. The structure, the hierarchy, the way design ops is supposed to design system is supposed to follow. These are all a means to an end. Okay, and which works for a product company to reach those things. But when you work in a services company, you see that you need to develop those means because you have to do more work, and hence that's not the only solution. So maybe a cycle is the best way to kind of go about it because continuous learning process.
I think that's a very interesting point of view that, I think it's a cycle. Often, sometimes people think, pehle I'll spread my, options open with consulting and then I'll focus on one. But as you said, I think it's always good to tinker with it more. It'll force you to actually expose yourself to various possibilities and also give you time to go deeper. I want to now, jump into you then joining brands and becoming a design leader, right? Pete at Myntra, Practo, Vedantu, a couple of companies, Common Flow. A big part of design leadership is design ops. I feel India's design practice or culture is maturing rapidly with new entrants coming. Now they're being very experienced people also in the market. Like when you used to start, when you must be starting, people with 15 years of experience in leadership and user experience was rare compared to how it is today. So what's happening is people are talking a lot about research and data-driven decisions and understanding the business and customer centricity. But I don't see a lot of conversations around design operations. So can you tell a little bit about how you tackle design operations and how design operations looks in a small setup or in a large setup?
For me, design ops came into picture when design teams started growing bigger and the complexities of managing files and everything started becoming, and the whole handover process and everything. The objective or the goal is that how can you free up your designers' time to do more design and operations being streamlined, right? And in some settings, having operations being done by designers is a way of bonding within the designers also, right? When you do handovers together, when you discuss design systems, or when you do project management together, or when you are doing all of those things together, it creates a lot of bonding. So my approach to all of this is context based. If I am in an organization and I assess the organization that what it is the best thing that is required here, and accordingly I operate. So in a larger team size where the bonding is happening and everything is happening, but I now want to free up this space and kind of create a design ops, a parallel, a track which helps us being much more efficient than I have a separate design ops team which is doing that. In some cases where it is very like you feel that whole activity is going to actually add a lot more value to the designers themselves because they now know about the complexity of things. I will actually try to have them done by the design team themselves. For me, it's always an efficiency thing that designers can spend more time being creative, solving the real problems, and we can be more agile, more faster with design after your approach to it. I think because coming with AI, I think agentic ops is going to solve a lot of those problems.
One core component of design ops is people. You've hired dozens and dozens of people just in 1 year, assuming promoted some people to leaders, gave leaders the opportunity to hire more people and make them work with each other, right? That's, I think, a very complex part of it. So when you're scaling a design team, let's say our management has said, hey, we have to ship a lot. Here is a budget. Go and hire. How do you do that in a manner where, the leaders are heard, the team is heard? Because I often see when scale, you get a new boss or you're given a new team. And then there's a lot of conflict there because, you not necessarily have co-built that team or be in the process of, a colleague becoming a leader. So how do you fix these problems between designers and reportees and managers, etc.?
My philosophy always had been that, and because I've been to multiple companies, that every organization is in a different time and space and they have very different requirements. First, I try to get the overall vibe of the company. Where are we right now? So if you're an early stage startup, one of the variables, like you have multiple variables. As a designer, I need to design leader. I first have to understand those variables. One is, the industry, which industry you are in, which market you are in, who are your competitors, what stage of the company you are in. You are early stage, late stage, how much investment you have. Okay, what are your stakeholders doing? How is the leadership responding to the stakeholder? Okay, what is the culture has been built into the organization? How the tech operates, how the product managers operate. So you try to put all these variables across, okay, and then you realize then what is the need of the organization. Then I kind of assess that what is the design's functions, contribution to the organization. In some cases, like for example, in one scenario, I was asked to hire a design research team. And I said that you don't need a research team right now, okay, because I don't think, you have enough, line items which are based on data insight, which is actually super low hanging. And for 1 year, you will not exhaust that, and it's better you do that because you are not making profit. Let's not, waste more resources on trying to figure out something which, and research is expensive. You will not be able to justify the ROI in a short term. So why do you want to do this? And let's not have a research team for 1 year. We'll see, come back to it. There's always, you can do ad hoc research with an agency. So you try to figure out all those scenarios and solutions. After you've played, and I have kind of, and again, like that's how I look at it. I mean, obviously, in some cases, like in Vedantu, we had a very large team, almost 50 members team. And it was very fast, very agile. We had to run. There were things happening. And we have suddenly grown to a 50-member team. Now, how do I manage and keep the team together and also make sure that, and see, when you grow a very big team, you need to have checks and balances that, the talent density is high. People should not fall through cracks and things like those. There's enough team bonding. The only way I could do that was being on the floor more myself so that I am engaged in actually most of the projects. Now, it might seem like 50 is a very huge number, but see, we have worked in a time when we were managing design multiple projects at one time. So till a level of 50 members team, I think you can still be engaged to some level in all projects, right? But if I were to do that same thing for Myntra, I will not do it in the same way. I will have a really, breakdown process whereby our next levels handle things subsequently below that. And I don't have to look at and be a part of every project all the time. So yeah, I mean, very much dependent upon the setup that you are in.
Got it. Understood. That's fair. The critique of design ops often is there is too much process and it stifles creativity. People always say that the bigger the company gets, they lose their edge of being more innovative and fast, right? Because everything needs to be logged in, processed, blah, blah. How do you ensure that you are still empowering creative people to be at the top of their game and have serendipity, while also making sure that there is design operations being followed just to keep, just to tackle the madness and the chaos?
The only way, I mean, if you want to, I mean, like if I have to think about it, the only way to keep the creativity and, like how do you spend more time doing design and less time doing ops? Okay, and getting too bogged down by the ops is being much ahead of business and product. Okay, for that you need to do hard work. If you lag behind, then business and product will always have inputs, and you will be in an operational mode all the time. And then it's only design ops, except for the fact that you are making some screens and things like on your executing, and then you are only focusing on the ops part of it. But the first thing to kind of keep inculcating the design thing, and for me that matters a lot, is that you think and your cycle is the design cycle is at least 2-3 cycles ahead of business and product. It's not easy to do. It's very tough to do because bandwidth is an issue you have, and that requires hard work. You cannot be easy specifically in spaces like startups and like the consumer internet products. Maybe in larger organizations, you might have a little bit of liberty to be ahead of the system even without number of hours with there or working outside office. But in some of these ultra competitive area, the only way to do that is that you have to work hard and you have to work outside your office hours. You keep thinking about solution and creativity, and you have to be ahead of these two big functions, which is business and product. So once you do that and you have your things ready and everything, and to some extent where you can have those conversations, then the ops part is something that is just the execution part, and you help it out, right?
Right.
So for you to be able to, because ops is critical. Ops is not just, you cannot ignore ops.
Fantastic. Another thing which I want to touch upon, this is, we're reaching towards the last of the podcast, is you'd mentioned agentic AI some time ago. There's also generative AI. They both are really transforming design operations, creative workflows. What does it mean to be a creative person, right? You always speak about this T-shaped designer where you focus on one, but you've got complementary or just generally other focus areas. Now, there's a talk of a V-shaped designer, right? Where everything converges into one person. Because आज आपको questions है, if you're asking the right questions, you don't necessarily need to know the craft of it, or there are a lot of depth in expertise in it, because GPTs will help you understand that. At least limited to the function of whatever you're doing as an expert, right? So with so much happening so soon, how do you feel, creative people will be able to stay relevant and also leverage AI in some incredible ways?
The way I look at it, I mean, because there is going to be a short-term impact of this and long-term impact of this, right? In the short term, what I see is that people, a lot of this ops is going to be, we can make it much more efficient with the help of AI. And you will not need hands on the floor to kind of do more screens or more, executional stuff and things like those. But still, I think there are very large areas which are going to be operated by designers, albeit lesser number of designers. Okay, which is like, first of all, the fundamentals of design. Like, if you are making an app, what is your choice of just a padding or line height or typography is going to have a different, impression of this whole thing. And somebody needs to be very, very thorough and clear about the fundamentals and what communicates what to make those choices. So while AI will give you hundreds of ideas and you have to pick those choices, your first principle thinking and philosophy of design has to be very bang on. And you need to know the nuances of the craft also to make those choices. So I think that is going to be still there. Second is also that you set those things up, you will still need the rules. Okay, and you need to kind of create those patterns. There will be a set of designers who will be more into setting those systems and the rules and how the machine itself, from which parameters the machine should work on. For example, you see a simple parameter like density, which is a very human-centric parameter. You take the chat GPT and now, you take Gmail and you can now actually change the compactness and all of that. But if you look at that, it's a combination of contrast, density, and which basically is that what is the top, the highest header font size versus the base font size, and what is the contrast of that, plus the line height variations and everything. So this is a emergent or an abstract parameter which is coming from the combination and how 10 other parameters operate with Excel. Now, who's going to set those rules up? Someone needs to really understand this, and designers who understand this and set those rules. Basically, it's kind of merging somewhere in the coding area also, like development. So, but yeah, I think those are going to be very, very critical. And finally, the pure creative part of it, which is our machines still are generating from what it is learning and what is existing in the world. Plus, it can also kind of generate on top of it. But I think human mind will able to create more anomalies than that, and that's the whole point of us being there. That you once a rule is set, how do you break the rules? Okay, and that's where designers play a big role, and you need to innovate on top of it. So I think more creative people will also have a lot of designers will also have a lot of role to play.
Absolutely agree. I think I love this quote where AI is the answer, but what is the question? So I think as long as you're there, I think things will look great for you as anybody currently in the landscape.
And in the long term, how I look at it is all about communication. Okay, if you look at some of these problems that we are solving right now are very in the vast evolution of humankind, they are very small, right? So solving for interface on mobile is probably maximum if we look back in the past and stuff in the future, probably it will be a 50-60 years run, or we'll see that, because tomorrow you don't know if mobile phones go away and you have neural networks coming in, you are seeing on the face, you will have a very different things solving. You're solving for a very different kind of set of problems. And but at the core of it, at least for really long duration, human communication is going to be very, very critical till the time AI takes off. Yeah, I mean, artificial intelligence takes over. Then probably I don't know what's the mode of communication would be.
Correct. No, I share this opinion with you. This brings us to the last question. Thank you so much for giving so many thoughts which will really help young creative folks. I think a lot of them are tuning in today because they want to be a design manager one day. They want to be a design leader one day. They see themselves in your shoes one day. So what advice do you have to young designers on how do you really make a successful design career, and how can you become a design leader?
The first thing, I will give a very small, idea about this. Let's see, whatever was established in the last 10, 15 years, and I was lucky to be part of that whole journey of UX from iPhone coming in to what we are today. Many of this are going to get challenged, right? So adaptability, keeping your eyes open, being fundamental to how design works and everything is going to be the most important thing for young designers today, so that they can observe, adapt, and quickly pick up things, put a lot of hard work. Because to be frank, sitting here today, I don't know how 5 years down the line design industry is going to look like and shape like. So that's the. But yeah, if you adaptability, learning, and changing your way of looking at design is going to be very, very critical, and that will happen automatically. You have to be there in the system, spend more time designing, spend more time with right people. That will happen through osmosis, and there's no easy crack to it that you pick something today and that's going to stay till you till 5 years down the line.
Correct.
Apart from that, I usually break down, a designer's canvas into 4 pieces. First is the fundamental and the basics. And this is from today's, if somebody is looking for a job, and when we hire somebody, how we look at things, right? So one is the fundamental. So your basics, and this is table stakes today. Okay. If I were to hire somebody in Myntra, or, somebody's going and trying to apply for Google, Microsoft, or Uber, or Swiggy, these are basics. So visual design, okay, copywriting, wireframing, your research processes. Now, we see a lot of portfolios where people talk about this, and you have to talk about this, but these are table stakes. If you don't if I see that somebody had on a on a desktop have justified end-to-end text, I have a question that do you really and justify the text without taking care of orphans or rivers or things like those, then you don't have that eye for detail. So
Right.
these things become very, very critical, and this is table stakes. We're not even saying that this is going to get you the job. You need to have this to even being considered. Second comes is that your product thinking, your business understanding, how much problems you have solved. You are probably have a little bit of a understanding of design systems. So, and maybe you are very good at visual design or something. For you are basically acing yourself up with some of these areas. Maybe not everything, because it's not easy for a young designer to be good with everything. So probably you are very, very specialized and you have gone a little deeper into one of this area. And the reason is because, and the third part is actually the depth part, because these are something that you have to add on top of it to be considered to stand out on the 5% of the entire population. And then comes the depth. I think depth is in very low supply these days. How deep have you gone in some of the areas? So if you have a domain expertise in some cases, if you are a design system expert in some area, I think as a young designer, you can also build a depth in some of these. Maybe you are very good with copy. It's okay. So that takes you to, let's say, 1% of the whole designer. And then I think apart from that is, like I said, that being future ready by being adaptable, AI. So these 4 things I feel is the canvas for how you look at your design.
Superb. I think that's some incredible advice. Thank you so much for articulating that so well into like almost a framework. So really appreciate that, Shayak. This brings us to the end of the podcast. I hope you had a good time.
Of course, like some of these questions help you also to kind of question yourself and where we stand in terms of design industry as a whole. So it's been a very wonderful conversation. Yeah, I hope some of these pointers and my ramblings were of any help to anybody. But yeah, it does.
They definitely will. And I'm glad you had a good time. For everybody who's stuck along, thank you so much for tuning in. If you'd like to hear another design leader like Shayak, please like, share and subscribe. A new episode will come out very soon.